The Book of Jude has one of the most mysterious passages in Scripture where it details the devil contending with the Archangel Michael for the body of Moses. Why did the devil want Moses' body? What was he planning on doing? What is that whole passage about? We're going to find out that and much more tonight on Thursday Night Theology. Welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is Ryan Pitterson. I am author of Judgment of the Nephilim, a comprehensive, biblical study of Genesis 6, the Nephilim giants, the fallen angels, the days of Noah, really explaining what that era was about in the Bible and showing how it is really a part of the most important prophecy in the Bible, the ultimate prophecy, the prophecy of the Messiah. So that's my first book, and I often talk about it, but I want to actually share what some others say about it too. So just for those who know, because I know there are some new people to my channel, to my content. So here are some reviews from people you might know on Judgment of the Nephilim here. So we see here from Gary Stearman. He had a lot of good things to say about it, as well as L.A. Marzulli, both friends of mine who now I've gotten to know over the years, and they had certainly great things to say. And actually, on that same note, I actually just got a copy of L.A. Marzulli's book, Countermove, where he gives his explanation on how the Nephilim giants returned after the flood. And it's important because, he and I don't agree on everything, but that's the point of nights like these, is that we can search the scriptures and try our best to understand, come together, share ideas, and learn from each other. That's what Thursday Night Theology is about. Also the author of The Final Nephilim, the sequel that goes from Genesis to Revelation. We'll get into that much more later about my new book and all my new content. But tonight we are focusing on Thursday Night Theology. Again, this is my night where I work for you. I take 3 questions or 4, time permitting, from my followers, from subscribers on social media during the week. I apply my research to try and search the scriptures to find out what are the answers to complex, mysterious questions about the Bible. And it can be on any topic in the Bible. It doesn't have to be on the Nephilim, as we're going to see tonight. So tonight we have 3 great questions. And these are questions that have been asked repeatedly from weeks ago. So I'm finally getting back to them. So don't think that if you wrote a question weeks ago, I'm not looking at them. I check them every week. So we have 3 great questions. We are going to look at Jude chapter 1, verse 9, and this mysterious contest between the devil and the Archangel Michael for the body of Moses. We're going to look into what did that mean? What was going on there? We are going to look at the watchers and the nations. Did God assign watcher angels to oversee all of the nations in the Old Testament? We're going to look into that question 2. And question 3, we're going to examine this idea, this verse in 2 Corinthians, where the Apostle Paul talks about the thorn in his flesh, a messenger of Satan. What is that? What did it mean? We're going to find out all those things tonight. Those are our 3 questions, and I'm very excited to get to them. So also, at the end of the night, we will have a special prize for a live viewer, so stay tuned for that as well. Tonight, I'm giving out a new prize tonight. The winner tonight of our giveaway will get an autographed copy of the hardcover version of The Final Nephilim. So I'll find it in a minute so I can show it to everybody, but you will win a hardcover copy. I'll show it to you later. We'll get to all that, but hope you guys are having a great time. Please introduce yourself in the chat, say where you're from, share your thoughts on these questions, and without further ado, we're going to get right into question 1. And this is from Derek, and he says, can you explain Jude 1, verse 9? Why would Satan want the body of Moses? Does this relate to the transfiguration or the ascension of Elijah? So great question. And so, of course, as we always do, we're going to go right to the scriptures to see what the Bible and how the Bible detailed this account of this kind of meeting before God's throne that involves Satan and the Archangel Michael. So, of course, here's the verse in question, and we read, yet Michael, the Archangel, obviously a righteous angel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, and he durst not bring a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. And obviously, I highlighted the key phrase there, that they were in a dispute over Moses' body after he died. And so what was that about? What's going on? Why was this taking place? And so we're going to look. And I think that when we look at the life of Moses and the death of Moses, we already start to get indications of what was taking place. And so we're going to go from the book of Jude all the way back to the Old Testament and look at the Bible's account of the death of Moses. And so now here we are in Deuteronomy chapter 34. And starting in verse 4, and of course, again, this is leading up to the death of Moses. We read, "And the Lord said unto him," speaking of Moses, "This is the land which I swear unto Abraham, unto Isaac, unto Jacob, saying, I will give it to your seed, to thy seed. But thou shalt not go over thither." Referencing the fact that Moses got to see the promised land, but did not enter it. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he, meaning God, I'm going to go back to that verse as we continue. And he, meaning God, where I had the first highlight there, God buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth Peor. But no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day, meaning his grave. And Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, and his natural force abated. He still had he had his strength. He was vibrant when he died. And of course, that's Deuteronomy 34. And so I think what that passage is telling us, and this is what I love, especially in the Old Testament, is looking at small details in Scripture. So what I think that passage is telling us is that God was very concerned about Moses's body, right? And in fact, and I think the interesting detail there is that it says no man knew where the sepulcher was, but it doesn't say that angels didn't know. It just says no man, that God buried his body. So there was something very significant that God was already worried about with respect to what might happen if people knew where Moses' body was, or if the enemy knew. And I think that's really getting into why there was this dispute. And I think that what at the heart of it is that the devil wanted to use the body of Moses to lure Israel into idolatry. So we're going to into sin, into rebellion against God. Why would the devil do that? Because that's what the devil's goal always is to find ways to lure people away from God and towards him, towards ultimately the worship of him. And so I think there's some support for this idea of angels being involved at the death, and at the grave. So let's look a little deeper. So here's a source here from 19th century. This is from 19th century theologian that looking at this exact question, and I'm going to go right back to it. But the great thing about the three questions tonight is that there is a lot of research out there on these three questions. So for those who aren't familiar, I take most of my research. I love going to the old sources, going back to the first century, to the church fathers, to ancient Jewish and rabbinical sources, all the way to the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, and looking at theologians, lay people, pastors who are writing on these issues. And these three questions had a lot of commentary in centuries gone by. And so we're going to go back and see a 19th century commentary on this very question. And it says, nay, that the angels have some charge and care of the bodies of good men after death may be gathered from that passage, Jude 1:9, where Michael, the archangel, said to have contended with the devil about the body of Moses. That ground of this controversy between them was maybe most probably explained by a passage, Deuteronomy 34, verse 6, where it says God took particular care, probably by an angel, concerning the burying of Moses in a certain valley. So again, this is referring back to Deuteronomy 34, where it describes his death, that God specifically buried Moses himself and made sure that no person knew where his body was located. So let's continue. The devil, it seems, had a fair prospect of laying a foundation for idolatry in the worship of Moses after his death, if he could have gotten the disposal of his body. But this God thought fit to prevent, in pity to the people of Israel, whom he saw upon all occasions so prone to idolatry, and for that reason committed it to the charge of Michael, the archangel, to bury his body secretly. And this was the thing which Michael, the archangel, contended with the devil about. And of course, that's from a book called Sermons by John Tillotson, written in 1886. So again, Tillotson goes right to this question that the devil clearly wanted to obviously use Moses' body for evil purposes. And I think the most likely thing would be some form of idolatry, some form of getting Israel, luring them into false worship. And so now I want to look at some of the scriptural examples to again, I think also support the idea of angels coming to a person at their death. And I think there's some interesting things that are revealed from these passages here. So this, of course, is the account in Luke chapter 16 of the rich man and the beggar Lazarus. And so just for, I'm going to go back to it in a second, but just to give context for those who aren't familiar with it, Jesus gave this account and really is describing what happened to two people, one faithful and one unbeliever, and one not, at their death. And many people call this a parable, but I do not believe that this is a parable at all. And I think the passage demonstrates that right from the beginning. So let's go there. And so we see in the first sentence, Jesus says there was a certain rich man. And I think that statement alone means that Jesus is talking about an actual person, that this is an actual event. This is not a parable that is just a fictional account used to teach a biblical principle. That he's telling an account of something that really happened. And so this rich man was clothed in purple and fine linen. He ate well. And then there was a beggar named Lazarus who was full of sores, suffering at the gate of this man. And he goes to say that Lazarus desired to be fed with crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. And we'll go back to it. And moreover, dogs came and licked at his sores. And it came to pass, right? So Lazarus is living in squalor, and this rich man has everything he needs. And it came to pass that the beggar died. And look what it says. It says he was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. So again, we see this idea that for the righteous at their death, angels come to their bodies. Like his spirit was escorted to Abraham's bosom, which of course in the Old Testament was where the souls of the righteous went before Christ's victory on the cross allowed everyone access into heaven. So we see some support there for this concept, so that angels would be aware of Moses and where his body was located. But let's continue. So one thing I also want to talk about too is before I bring up those verses, is just think about this notion as well. The idea of the importance of the body even after death. And as Christians, I think in our modern times, we don't think about that as much. And I say in many interviews and presentations I give that our salvation is not just spiritual, that we're not just born again of spirit. Of course we are. At the moment you believe, you receive a new spirit, you are regenerated, you receive the Holy Spirit of God, and you are saved. But your body will also be redeemed. It's the redemption of the soul and body. Salvation is physical and spiritual. And I think that's very important to understand, because we see the importance of this in the Old Testament. Your body, although if you die and your body decays and goes to dust, that dust, you will be restored and translated. The Bible says that we will be transformed in the twinkling of an eye. Our corruptible body will be turned into an immortal, what the Apostle Paul calls a celestial body, the immortal body that angels possess at what is called the translation or the transformation or the rapture. And all these things are about the body being transformed into something. So you have a new body, but it's your body transformed. And we see evidence of this, of course, when Jesus, at the resurrection of Jesus Christ, he still had his wounds in his hands. And that obviously Thomas the apostle said, I will not believe unless I can touch his wounds. He still had them. So it was his body, but it's just what we call the glorified immortal body. So if you look in the Old Testament, there are examples of the importance that was placed on the body. So here's one example. Here's Job. In Job chapter 19, this is Job speaking of Jesus, of the Messiah. And he says, for I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. So this is end times prophecy, talking about the return of Jesus to earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh I shall see God, who I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, though my reins be consumed within me. So here again, Job is contrasting. He's saying, I know my body's going to decay, but I am still going to see Jesus in the flesh, in my flesh. And how could that be? Because his body is going to be translated. He already understood this idea that his body wasn't just going to go away, that Jesus was going to take him and translate his body to the celestial, the glorified, immortal body that all born-again believers receive. We see another example of this, the importance of the body after death, with Joseph in the book of Genesis. And of course, Joseph had rescued his family. He, rose to prominence in Egypt by becoming second in command to Pharaoh, allowing him to save his family from the famine that struck the Middle East for 7 years, and allowing his family to move to Egypt to build the nation of Israel, 70 family members in the nation of Israel. And so in chapter 50, the last chapter, as Joseph is dying, he gives a prophecy about the Exodus. And so we'll take a look at that in the second verse on this slide here. And this, of course, is Genesis 50. And this is Joseph speaking to his brothers on his deathbed, essentially. And he says, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. So he's already saying that, he's already prophesying the Exodus, that God's going to take you out of Egypt one day and bring you to the promised land. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. And of course, it says that if you notice that the last details are very interesting too, and it also supports the validity of the Bible. Notice that it says that he was embalmed, right? So he, again, living in Egypt after the custom of Egypt, his body was embalmed, which of course allows for it to be preserved. And he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So Joseph prophesied, Joseph, take my bones from here, because he wanted to be translated. When he's translated, he wanted his body to be in the promised land. So he said, when you leave Egypt, take my corpse with you. So again, you see the significance to it. So this all goes to show, again, there's biblical support for why the body of Moses would be important, right? Because even in ancient times, the people of Israel, and of course, this is before even the nation of Israel, talking about Joseph, they already understood the concept of the resurrection, the translation, the body being translated. So there is, good biblical evidence for why this was so important and why the devil would try to seize on this opportunity. So continuing, we can just go to another source, I think, that really also drives this home from the ancient church. Actually, I'll show one more verse. So this is from Isaiah 26, and this is an end times prophecy. I won't read the whole prophecy, but you can just look at the language. It's end times. It says, we have been with child, we've been in pain. As it were, we were brought forth wind. So all these ideas of birth pangs, a woman in travail, this is end times prophetic language. And then God is responding to Israel in the highlighted verse where the Lord is saying, thy dead men shall live, together with my dead body shall they arise. Amazing messianic prophecy right here. So it's not only prophesying the resurrection of believers, it's also prophesying the resurrection of Christ, because God is speaking to Israel saying, with my dead body you shall arise. So this is, just an amazing passage. And we'll go back to it, of course. And it says, awake and sing, ye that dwell in dust, for thy dew is as of the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out her dead. And it goes on to talk about God's people being in their chamber, shutting the door, hiding yourself for a little moment until the indignation overpasses, which I think this is all a reference to the church being raptured, believers being raptured until the indignation overpasses and God returns and pours out his judgment. But the point there is that God is saying that those of you who dwell in the dust, meaning the decomposed bodies of believers, God's going to carry gather you and translate you. So again, it shows the importance of the body, and our salvation has a physical component to it. And now we'll go to one more source that I think really drives this point home. And so this again is from a 19th century commentary, and it says, "Yet Michael, the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses. This strikes me as a suggestion of a blessed thought. Over the sleeping dust of the leader of the host of Israel, buried in the unknown recess of some mountain in the desert, the archangel watched, lest Satan should disturb it. And if this was so, may it not be true that angels in shining groups are watching by these green sods?" So notice the author here is saying, hey, if angels are watching over Moses' grave, are perhaps are angels watching over our graves and over the dust that we will leave in the earth when we die. And so continuing, he says, and this is John Cumming speaking in 1863, "We are so prone to think of the soul, and we cannot think too deeply or too feelingly," there's a word, "about its destiny, that we forget that every atom of our dust is redeemed with the same precious blood with which every faculty of our souls and every affection of our hearts have been redeemed long ago. And it may be the same angels that minister to us, the living heirs of salvation, meaning us, the church believers, that have charge of that clay which waits for the burst of the resurrection morn." I'll just go back for this ending because it's beautiful language. "And the first roll of the archangel's trumpet." So just an amazing thing. And again, this is from The World as It Will Be by John Cumming in 1863. And just in a beautiful language, he says that even every atom of our body matters to Jesus. And Jesus says that. He says that he knows every hair on our head. So it's that this idea that Jesus is going to redeem all of us. And so our dead body, even as dust, matters to God, and God knows where it is, and God will regather us and translate us into our glorified body. So I think there's lots of evidence there for why this took place. The last thing I want to mention, this question took there's a lot of research to mention because there's a lot out there on this question. The last thing I'll mention is there is one apocryphal text called The Assumption of Moses. Unfortunately, it no longer exists, but I did find a number of early church fathers who referred to it, who, early theologians in the church who quoted this book and said, this is where this account of Satan and the Archangel Michael is described in detail in this account. But again, it doesn't exist, so it's nothing I could quote right now. But I want to make sure I at least reference that. So that is my answer to question number 1. So hopefully that was satisfactory. And I have a special treat tonight. So I'm going to take a peek into the chat room. If you have questions, I forgot if you're new, if you have questions that you want me to answer, for overtime, if there's time permitting, I will answer questions. So feel free to type them in the room, and hopefully you guys are all having good fellowship in there. Additionally, I have a special treat. And also I put the ticker up to say that if you're watching this on replay, if you're not watching this live, welcome. Thank you for watching. And if you have a question for a future episode, just type it in the comments, whether you're watching it on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Type your question in the comments. I review them. I can use them. I will consider them for a future episode. So a lot of my questions I get are from replay viewers who just typing in comments on YouTube or Facebook. So that's another thing I just want to make sure everyone is clear on. So as I said, I have a surprise as I go to check the chat room to see how the questions are and see if there are any questions I can line up for overtime. I get asked all the time about, in addition to the Final Nephilim, Judgment of the Nephilim, my books, we also have the documentaries, Judgment of the Nephilim, Secrets of the Pre-Flood World, and the Final Nephilim, Battle for Heaven and Earth. These are high-level overviews that go over all this. Really, it's a way to understand the big concepts of my books in a night. If you want to know the books in one night, these are for you. They're also great, obviously, as an entree for people who are new to these topics and for people who aren't even believers, to let them know that all these things going on in the supernatural realm, in the unseen realm, that the Bible has the answers to them. But tonight, On this episode, I am going to premiere the trailer for the documentary. So as I go check the chat room, I will play that for you now and enjoy. When we look at Genesis 6 from the supernatural perspective, it starts to answer a number of questions we see all throughout the Bible. Why would a loving God send a devastating flood that wiped out the entire global population, only leaving 8 people alive? Why did the Pharaoh, during the Exodus, order all the male children in Israel to be executed? Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, please put some thumbs up, some hearts in the room, in the chat, because you are the first people to see that trailer. And as you can see, I made these documentaries with a cinematography team that's worked on Hollywood films. They do lots of commercials and ads you've seen on TV. So it was a really, really great experience. I enjoyed it. I'm super happy with the final product. And so you got to see a preview of the trailer that is now done, and now, as they say, in the can, finished. So while that happened, I was also able to finally find a hardcover copy. So here is a hardcover copy of the Final Nephilim, and again, this will be an autographed copy of this hardcover. That will be tonight's prize for our giveaway. So here it is, and again, wherever you are in the world, doesn't matter. I will ship it to you for free. So, okay. Moving on to question number 2. And this is from Sharon. Did God assign watcher angels to rule over the nations in the Old Testament? And if so, how many? Okay, excellent question. And so this is very straightforward to me. And again, there's a lot of ancient research on this question and commentary on this question, and the answer is yes. And I think this can be very clearly established biblically when we look in the book of Deuteronomy, specifically in the Septuagint. And for those who aren't familiar with the Septuagint, it is a translation of the Old Testament that was written roughly 200 BC, circa 200 BC, translating from Paleo-Hebrew into Greek. And its account of several different passages that involve angels is much more explicit than other versions you're going to find. There are reasons for that, but that's for another Thursday Night Theology that I may do as a question one day. But what I want to go to is Deuteronomy 32, where this question, I think, is specifically answered in detail in the Septuagint. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so again, this is Deuteronomy 32, and this is Moses recounting kind of history to the Israelites and says, remember the days of old, consider the years for past ages, ask thy father, and he shall relate to thee, thine elders, and they will tell thee. When the Most High, meaning God, divided the nations, and when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the nations according to the number of the angels of God. And his people, I'll go back to it, and his people, Jacob, became the portion of the Lord. Israel was the line of his inheritance. So this verse in the Septuagint says explicitly that God when he divided the nations of the world. And of course, we see that there's a table of 70 nations in the book of Genesis, that there were 70 nations, that God did it according to the number of the angels of God. So that's the division, right? So that's it. And so essentially, and this is something I reference in Judgment of the Nephilim, where I basically describe the fact that God, after the Tower of Babel rebellion, when God scattered the nations, confused the languages, and people started moving to different areas, and God divided the nations. Essentially, God turned over the Gentile world to the angels and said, I'm going to make my own nation from one man, from Abraham. And so, in fact, the chapter is called One Man Against the World, because it's really God said, I'm going to use one man. You can have all the nations. I'm going to use one man in the promised land and bring him to the promised land and build a nation from it. Of course, that was Abraham. And so Deuteronomy 32 in the Septuagint is really describing that's how God divided the nations among the angels of God. And there's another passage also in Deuteronomy that corresponds to it that I think additionally also supports that. So let's take a look at that as well. Okay, let me see if I can get to, here we go. This is Deuteronomy chapter 4. And this is a warning about idolatry, and it says, lest thou lift your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, the stars, even all the host of heaven, again, referring to angelic beings, and should even to worship them and serve them, which the Lord God has divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. So again, we see in Deuteronomy this confirmation of this idea, this concept that God is dividing the nations among the angels. And so he's assigning them authority to a certain level over the nations. And this is pretty much said explicitly in Deuteronomy. But we also played out in how these angels actually interact in the book of Daniel. And in Daniel chapter 10 specifically, we get an amazing account. Daniel chapter 10 is one of these kind of it really like a peek behind the veil chapter, like Job chapter 1, Job chapter 2, where God is talking to the devil in heaven, the sons of God. You know, there's one of these chapters where God is giving us a peek into how things operate in the spiritual realm. And I think it's an amazing passage because we see Daniel is praying and fasting for 3 weeks on behalf of Israel, for God to restore Israel from the Babylonian captivity, to bring redemption to Israel after they rebelled against God and were punished by being taken over, conquered, and brought into captivity. And you see that prayer is answered. It's a really fascinating account to see, because we see how the angelic realm operates. And so we'll look at that passage from Daniel chapter 10. And this is the Daniel recounting what the angel said to him who came to him. He said, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee and stand upright. For unto thee am I now sent. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood trembling. Then he said unto me, fear not, Daniel, for first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. So first off, amazing, right? That he had been praying and fasting 3 weeks. And the angel tells him, from the first day you prayed, God heard you and sent me. So think about that. That yet it took 3 weeks for the angel to get there. So in your own life, when you think about your own walk with God, your own prayers, and what could be hindering them, this is showing us that there are conflicts take place that we're not even aware of in the spiritual realm. And so it also tells us to persevere in that prayer and fasting work, that we have to persevere because we could just be days away from that prayer being answered. So back to it and finish the passage. And so he says again, I came for thy words. And look where it starts. Look where the highlight starts. It says, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. So amazing. So here we're seeing angelic warfare. This angel is saying, I was fighting the prince of the angel assigned to the kingdom of Persia, fought with me for 21 days, the entire time that Daniel was praying. And it took, again, look who's back, the Archangel Michael, who of course, as we'll find out, is assigned to Israel. That he is the angel assigned over Israel. It says you're the chief prince, one of the chief princes. He had to intervene and help basically beat up the prince of Persia to allow the angel to make it to Daniel to answer his prayer. So it's really a dynamic illustration of how angels are operating. Angels are assigned to different nations, that they're fighting each other, that they are stop prayers from being answered, trying to prevent Israel from being redeemed. So there's a lot going on in this passage. So it's really, really fascinating. And then as the passage continues, we see that another angel, fallen angel, evil angel, who is introduced in this same chapter. And I'm going to just go to the end. We're going to skip ahead in the end. And he says, this is again the angel speaking to Daniel, saying that, then said he, knowest thou wherefore I came unto, and now I will return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I'm gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia, meaning Greece, shall. Amazing again that he is prophesying, because remember, in the history of Gentile kingdoms, the Medo-Persian Empire was conquered by the Greeks. So he was already prophesying, yes, this kingdom isn't going to last. They're going to go away, and Greece is going to take over and conquer. And their angel, who's assigned to them, I'm going to fight with him in the future. So again, it's just really, really amazing insight into what's taking place. And is this idea of that the angel withstood in defense, in a battle defense posture, essentially, shield up, that he's so the angel Gabriel is fighting against the prince of Persia, and he's holding his ground, essentially. I mentioned that because now we'll go to the New Testament, where the Apostle Paul is talking about angels and the fight that takes place between believers and angels, and notice the language used. And so, of course, this is Ephesians 6, verses 12-13, where Paul's describing who Christians are supposed to be fighting. It says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Right? We're not fighting human beings. Human beings are our enemies. It says, but against principalities. Again, that's a reference to an angel, but also to location, a principality, an angel who's ruling over a specific geographic location, against powers, rulers of darkness, spirituals in high places. And then it says, what is his conclusion from that? Since that's who we're fighting against and wrestling against. It says, "Therefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand." So he's even invoking the same language that the angel Gabriel used to describe angelic warfare, withstanding. He's saying do the same thing. So just very fascinating. So again, I think it's showing us the Bible's gives very clear indications that there is a geographic dominion essentially given to certain angels, and they have boundaries, they have territories, and they will battle against each other periodically. And so I wanted to go, of course, to one ancient source that comments on that and also drives this point home. And so this is from a book called Miracles, the Synoptic Gospels in 1879 by Walter Cassels. And he writes, angels are appointed as princes over the 70 nations of the world. The Septuagint translation of Deuteronomy 32:8 introduces the statement. The number of nations was fixed at 70. The number of souls who went down into Egypt. Jerusalem Targum of Genesis 11 reads, God spake to the 70 angels, which I'll go back to that. Sorry. which stand before him. That's how Genesis 11:7-8 reads in the Jerusalem Targum. It is believed that the angels of the nations fought in heaven when their allotted peoples made war on earth. So really, again, fascinating concept. And so this notion that there are 70 angels who some rank that they were assigned to that, I think there's really validity to that even in the Bible. Because again, you see that passage reference that there were 70 family members who started the nation of Israel in Egypt. When Jesus sent his disciples out and empowered them to cast demons and perform supernatural works, he sent 70, 2 by 2. And so I think there's a reflection, in terms of a type or a typology to the notion of what's taking place in heaven. So wouldn't surprise me at all if that's the case, that there are these 70 angels of who were then at that time, after the Tower of Babel dispersion, assigned over the Gentile nations. And remember, as we spoke about in previous Thursday Night Theology, even fallen angels can still access heaven. They can still speak to God. They're still treated with respect. So God can still interact and essentially assign them to do things, like saying, you will take this territory. Like he told the devil, I will allow you to harm Job, but you cannot kill him. All these things. So God literally sets their physical boundaries and their boundaries of action as well. So that is my question number 2. And there are also other ancient sources. There are a lot of ancient sources that talk about this too as well. So Philo, who was an ancient Jewish scholar in the time of Josephus, he wrote in detail about this as well as a number of early church theologians, where I think there's a lot of great research that supports this notion. So that's answer to question number 2. I'm going to pop the chat room. Let's see who's here. Looks like we got a lot of commentary going on, which is great. I love to see it. Love to see the fellowship. Okay, let me see. Who do we have here? Okay, Jose, hello from Florida. See, Disco Lover in El Paso, Texas. All right. Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. Chad, Doug, and Milbury. All right, greetings. Good. I will check for some more questions as well. But glad to see everyone talking and having fellowship, because again, that's really what this evening is about. It's really about just having fun, talking, getting to the scriptures, looking at these difficult questions and seeing what the scriptures reveal. So, all right. And I see some people mentioning Dr. Michael Heiser. Yes, good. I quote him in Judgment of the Nephilim. So good person to research and impersonate as well. I see someone said they're using his voice. So on that note, before we get to question 3, I have another surprise. So I'm excited because I have my trailers already. So now in documentaries, we also have these study guides. And so the study guides are companion study guides for Judgment of the Nephilim. And you notice I'm going back and forth with Nephilim and Nephilim because I want to make sure that people feel comfortable. I was on a show last week that's a secular show. And so I wanted to alleviate anyone's concern that it's fun to say either. Obviously, many people say Nephilims. I am in Hebrew. It is pronounced Eem, like Elohim, which is just a plural. It's just adding a plural. It's like putting S on the end of a word in English. But either. So that's why I'm using both. But the companion study guides are really it's really kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of the documentaries. If you want to get really deep into the concepts of the book, understand the research, etymology, to really be able to explain these concepts and understand them, and in a group setting alone, the study guides are definitely for you. That's what it's really for. I wrote all the questions. There's lots of commentary all through it. I use the commentary to provide the answers after you do the question, so it really flows right along with the book. And again, really a response to many people who asked me. I was asked many times after I wrote my first book, because I put a lot of research into it. Will you ever write a study guide? So now they're here, and the trailer is here. So I'm going to play that trailer for you now, the premiere for the companion study guides. That's it. Hope you enjoyed. That was a quick one, much quicker one than the document one. So made that one produced to be much shorter. And also, I want to show one thing is people have asked. I'm getting images of the book, hopefully by Amazon for whatever reason. When you do study guides, you can't just upload whatever images you want. But I will show because people have asked, what is in this study guide? What does it look like? And so here are some pages from it right here. You see there's lots of different types of questions. I do lots of filling in verses that I think it's important to write scripture and understand it and go to the Bible and have to actually write it word for word. I think it's a good way of understanding the Bible. And again, the commentary as well. So for those who've asked, this is it. And hopefully soon those will be up on Amazon as well as on the Judgment of the Nephilim site, where I'll have lots of those images up as well, so you can see exactly what the book looks like, the interior, what the questions are like, the commentary, and all that good stuff. So now, let's get to our final question. Question number 3. Can you explain Paul's thorn in the flesh? And this is from Gary. Excellent question. And this is a very, very complex concept. So I'm gonna endeavor to give my best explanation of what I think the thorn in the flesh is. And of course, we're going to go to the passage where Paul talks about this thorn as he refers to it. Oh, sorry. Here's the passage here. So we're going to go to 2 Corinthians first, 12. And starting in verse 7, it says, and also, I'll pull up the verse for one moment just to again give the context. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, this chapter opens with the Apostle Paul talking about visiting the third heaven, the heaven where God resides. In spirit, he says, in the spirit of the body, I don't know. So, and God revealed things to him that he said should not even be uttered. So he was able to stand before the throne of God to actually access heaven. And so that's the backdrop for this discussion of the thorn in the flesh. And so as we get to verse 7, he's saying, and lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelation. So this is all about the fact that he was able to act as heaven. And remember, as we know from scripture, fallen angels, the devil, they can also access heaven. So it's very likely they were there, that Paul's there, and when the angels or the devil himself was there, and to see that he was able to go speak to God in heaven. And it says, because of this abundance of revelations, there was given to Paul a thorn in the flesh, a messenger, and I put the Greek angelos of Satan to buffet me. And of course, we'll continue in that verse, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, 3 times, that it depart from me. And he, meaning Jesus, said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So it's really interesting, this idea of that. I mean, we don't see any description like this in scripture where it says a messenger. And again, that term there is angel. That term is only used in about 99% of the usages of that word in the New Testament. It means angel, a heavenly realm angel. The only other 2 usages are in reference to John the Baptist, who's quoted, who Jesus calls the messenger who went before him. And so that leads me to believe that we, again, trying to always take the Bible at its literal meaning, that Paul's referring to the fact that a messenger, an angelic being of Satan, was afflicting him. And I think that, and many of the theories on this, I think that most of the theories are probably all in the same kind of neighborhood in terms of what they think this means. Most people, if you read commentaries, say it was an illness, that he was partly blind, or he had sores, or he couldn't walk at times, or he had epilepsy. They say there's some illness he had that was plaguing him. It was an infirmity. I think there's validity to that, but I think it was even deeper. I think it was an affliction that was so intense, but there was also a spiritual component of it where Paul knew this is the devil coming after. I feel bad, or I have a badness, or I hurt myself, that this is the devil is doing it to the point that his presence is being manifested. And I think that, because if you think about Paul's life and all the hard time he went through, he's repeatedly in jail, shipwrecked, persecuted, all these different things happen to him. And he repeatedly is just walking in faith, not even bothered by these things. And then think about the experience he's talking about. He went to heaven. He spoke to God in heaven. So you got brought to heaven to speak to God in the spirits, to actually talk to God in heaven. It's hard for me to believe that just a normal being sick is going to shake him at all after that. Not to mention he's already a man of faith. So I think that affliction was on a much more powerful, sinister spiritual level. And so we're going to look at some examples of where Satan clearly is showing afflicting people, because there's biblical evidence of this. So let's take a look at that. So here in Luke 13, and it's a long passage here. I won't read the whole thing, but the woman who's had an infirmity for 18 years, and it says that she could not lift herself in no wise. And Jesus saw her and called unto her and said, "Woman, thou art loosed from thy infirmity." So he heals her after 18 years of not being able to really move, even being mobile. And the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation because Jesus healed her on the Sabbath day. And so they get into this whole discussion about the Sabbath, and Jesus responds and rebukes him, saying, "Thou hypocrite, doth not each one of you let me go back to it. One of you on the Sabbath lose ox or his ass from the stall and lead him away to watering? And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan hath bound, lo, these 18 years be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day?" So here Jesus directly says the 18 years of suffering she's going through, it was Satan who did this to her, like directly implicating the devil as causing this to happen to her. So again, we see the devil can afflict people directly. Another clear example is in the book of Job. So, of course, this is, again, when I referenced Job chapter 2 earlier, where the devil is in heaven speaking to God before his throne and making this kind of bargain about what he can do to Job, because he's telling God that if you let me harm Job, he'll never worship you. He only worships you because you protect him. You do good things for him. Take away the good things, and he'll turn away from you. And of course, this is when they're discussing what Satan can do. What are the parameters of how he can afflict him? And it's, "But put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face." This is the devil's dare to God. And God said unto Satan, "Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life." So basically, you can harm him, but you can't kill him. So Satan forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with soils from the sole of his feet unto his crown. So just cover him in really disgusting sores and boils, right? So again, we see the devil can clearly afflict people directly and take action to make people suffer. And of course, we know the devil in Job chapter 1, he destroys Job's land, kills his children. So we can see this is the intent of the enemy, is to destroy, essentially, and have that power to destroy and harm believers, right? And this is, again, very significant in Paul's walk. And there's another detail from this passage in 2 Corinthians 12 that I find very interesting. So let's look a little deeper. Going back to that passage, and notice it says that, first of all, it says that the messenger of Satan to buffet me. And that word buffet in the Greek, carpizo, it means to fight, to hit. It refers to violence. So again, this is why I think it's more than just the devil got him sick. The devil was like attacking him, or this messenger, this angel of Satan was attacking him. And notice it says that Paul besought Jesus 3 times that it might depart from him. And so remember, in Luke chapter 4, when the devil was tempting Jesus in the wilderness, after Jesus had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, How many times did the devil tempt? He tempted him 3 times. And after the third temptation had ended, it says he departed. So Paul was almost going back to what Jesus did, saying, "Hey, I'm asked Jesus 3 times to just remove this from me, so the devil might depart." But of course, God had other plans and tells him a powerful principle that His grace is sufficient. So, lesson for us all that in our affliction, that we're suffering, whether it's personal struggles in our family, in our marriage, at work, children, your kid at school, your friends, your enemies, whatever it may be, God's grace is sufficient, and we should seek Him. And that when we are weak, that's when God's power can manifest. He says that God said that His strength is perfected in weakness. That we're children. I say to as an object lesson. I was a youth teacher for many years, and I used to say to teens and young people, right? So we automatically understand that they're demonstrating their weakness, that they cannot move absent in us, and our immediate reaction is to get them. And that's what God is saying, that when we cry out to Him, that His strength is perfected in our weakness. So got to make sure our power is on. So I'm going to just, this is live. So I'm going to play the trailer real quick and get our power so this power doesn't run on the laptop. When we look at Genesis 6 from the supernatural perspective, it starts to answer a number. Okay, I went to talking, I forgot the power cord sitting right next to me, and I didn't even put it in. So took care of that. So, but again, lesson about God's strength being perfected in our weakness. So just keep that in mind, that some afflictions we're meant to go through, right? God sometimes the answer to our prayers is no or no. That God is not going to release from the hard time we're going through, but in that reliance on Him, in a daily plea, seeking God, that allows His power to build our faith and make us better believers. It's not solving the earthly problem we have. From the spiritual standpoint, it's making us much, much, much stronger and much closer to Him. So I want to go to some research on this. I think that this again will show that from the early church was the understanding of what the thorn was. So let's look. Oh, sorry about that. Everything shifted on my screen with the power. So let me go back to this quote here. All right, here we go. And this is from Jonathan Gill, my favorite commentator, but is quoted in a magazine, a Christian magazine. He says, "But after all, I see not but that the devil himself may be meant for, as before observed, the phrase a thorn in the flesh is metaphorical, and the other, a messenger of Satan, is literal, explains it." So if you want to know what the thorn in the flesh was, he's saying messenger of Satan is that thorn. And the whole may be read thus: was given to me a thorn of flesh, nay, the angel to buffet me. Satan, who was once an angel of light, now of darkness, is the thorn in the flesh, and might be suffered to appear visibly to him, to Paul, from time to time in a very terrible manner, and which was very grievous to be borne. He might, by permission, have great power over his body, as he had over Job, to use it ill, to beat it and buffet it. So just amazing what Gill is saying here. He's basically put together that just like Job, the devil's going to afflict him, but this is even worse, where he could possibly manifest before Paul and attack him. And again, that would make sense in light of what Paul had experienced. Paul had unbelievable revelation from Jesus. He was he saw Jesus from heaven on the road to Damascus and spoke. He spent basically 3 years on Mount Sinai learning from God before he started his ministry. He was brought to the third heaven and given revelation there. So he had an extraordinary amount of direct encounters with the Lord. And so again, it takes something really powerful to shake his faith. And so I think that Gil really nails it when he says that it was like Job, where he was afflicted with some pain, with sickness, but it was also the devil directing to where he knew it was from. So I believe that would be thorn in the flesh. So that's my answer to question number 3. And that was it. So we'll see. Anyway, I'm going to check the chat room as we wrap up. And don't worry, I haven't forgotten about our giveaway. So it's happening in a moment. But let me just check the comments and see if there are a couple of questions I can answer quickly for overtime before we wrap up this episode. Okay, let's see what we got here. Thorn in the flesh is also mentioned in Deuteronomy. Oh, good point, Vicky. I should have mentioned that. Very good point. Okay, I'm scanning. I love to see all the comments. I'm glad there's lots of discussion in here. I'm just looking to see if we can find a question or not. Oh, Brian, my man, said preach. I'm trying, my brother. I'm trying to preach. Good to see you here tonight. All right. Let's see. Brenda said, I believe, speaking with the thorn in the flesh, I always thought it had to do with his eyes, because there was a writing to one of the church. Paul was questioning them and said at one time they would have given their eyes. Good point. There's lots of research that actually supports that it was a partial blindness or he at its time be blind, say, for a week and then restore his vision, but like it was either a partial or full temporary blindness. Okay. Can you get Kindle? So the Final Nephilim and Judgment of the Nephilim are available on Kindle on these going through the approval process, but they will be available on Kindle as well. And I also see questions about the Audible. So the Final Nephilim is coming out in Audible, but that will not be until spring of 2022. And I know lots of people love it. And I love audiobooks now myself too, now that I drive, because I don't live in New York City anymore. But with all the projects I did, there was just no time to get to it. So spring of 2022, I will be back in the studio recording the audiobook, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing it. Okay, let's see. I'm a pastor, Bill and Kathy from Northern Wisconsin. All right. Well, lots of great discussion, but I didn't see overtime questions. I'll take one last look, but in the meantime, I'm going to announce our winner. Let me just do a quick check with my producer here on who our winner is tonight. And again, if you are the winner, just send me a DM on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on the judgmentofthenephilim.com website. Any of those things, let me know your address, and I will send your prize. The hardcover, which is beautiful, by the way. It's great. If you're a book lover, I absolutely love the hardcover. So the winner tonight is, just gotta remember my code, Mary Martinez. So, Mary, if you are in the room, congratulations. Please contact me, DM me your contact info, and you will get an autographed copy of the hardcover shipped to you anywhere in the world. So congratulations for that. So with that, that's it. I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much. And again, I will questions again for later on. If you're watching on replay, you can put them in the comments. I definitely will be checking them and using them and seeing what I can use for future episodes. Again, for any information to reach me, to find more information, you can find links to all my social media in the video description. You can also obviously find all the things I described, the books, the documentaries, the study guides at judgmentofthenephilim.com. If you have questions, also you can contact me on my website as well. Thank you so much for your time. Hope you enjoyed it. And Lord willing, I will see you next Thursday.